not to be, grotesque, but for instance, bedpans. We had a bedpan hopper, and it was a thing in the wall, and you closed it, and allegedly it sanitized. Then you opened it and you took it out and you used it on the next patient. Now everything is disposable. You wouldn't even think about that kind of stuff.
We wanted to know how professionals have changed over time, so we got different experts from multiple decades to share their experiences.
Okay, yeah, these were around. This is made of glass.
No, I don't know if I used the glass syringes, but this was the model for the plastic syringe.
That's pretty cool. This is good stuff right here. Oh my goodness, I like this. Our syringes are definitely not glass. So I assume this is reusable.
These got autoclaved, and they were not single use.
Yeah, right. Which is dicey, because if you put that in the vein in one piece, automatically the blood of the patient comes back into that cylinder. So that's why that's not too good.
No, absolutely not. No matter what's in there, even if it's just normal saline, we're tossing it out. And they don't come this packaging everything is cool about this, because they come in a little box. Our syringes come in a sheet of plastic, little packages.
They draw blood, and then they didn't know what to do with it, and they'd stick it in the mattress, and the needle in the mattress. And you had these spongy mattresses, and every once in a while you'd go to make a bed and, find something was a little squishy, and you'd see that it wasn't water.
The stretchers would ooze sometimes.
What? And what then?
We did it all the time.
Put it into the mattress. I've never seen that done, no, because that's dangerous.
It was the safest thing to do. Nobody ever saved their caps, and you're doing everything fast. So you just stick the needle in the bed, or if you're putting an IV in and you had to try a couple times, each time you just stick it in the mattress, and then you take it out.
We have sharp containers now, so if you are using any sharp and you're done with it, you will just throw it in the sharps container.
After AIDS, of course, that wasn't done anymore, but it was done a lot.
A good friend of mine, she wound up sticking herself with the needle in the mattress. She was on retrovirals for a whole year and wound up with a lawsuit. Blood pressure, pulse, and respirations. That was it.
Blood pressure, pulse oximeter when that came out on the finger, temperature.
We're checking your heart rate, we're checking your blood pressure, we're checking your oxygen saturation, and pain assessment. Yeah, those are the main ones. The new literature or information that's out there is saying that pain should be included in your vital signs.
There was 6 nurses on each shift, and I think 2 of them were men, so 2 of 18.
When I started, it was 2 and 2. It was me and another female nurse, and we started with 2 guys. Every shift there was a male nurse, and every day I worked with a male nurse in some capacity.
If they staff maybe about 25 nurses in that ER per shift, maybe 5 of us were guys. You will probably find the most males in nursing as a whole, probably in the ER and the ICU, but we're still outnumbered significantly.
Well, it's great, number one, because you got a man. You got a man's hands. You're lifting and hauling and pushing and pulling these patients. And it's great to have a nurse here, but then you got a man here.
I guess we are a little bit popular because as a male nurse, we do a lot of the heavy lifting. Some of the older male nurses will tell you stop. Don't just have them call you just for that. There's assistive devices now that makes lifting and sliding patients and repositioning patients a little bit easier.
A medication error. I picked up something and gave a wrong A that sounded similar like that. As soon as I knew it, I nearly threw up.
I don't know if you ever heard of the drug TPA, the clot buster. I was the first one to give the drug in my department, and I was shitting bricks because the drug is like $5,000 a vial. Person is having a heart attack. I was very new and had that patient and the rest of the room and kind of got left in the cold. And I get to the bedside and we're all ready. I give the first dose, which is the most important one, the bolus, in a syringe, and then I drop the bottle. I got reamed out by the charge nurse who should have been helping me anyway and wasn't. And they had to send another bottle of the medication. The patient was fine, but that was my roughest moment.
Yes, I think especially in the beginning, being a new grad, being a new nurse, whether it's giving a medication the wrong route, giving them the wrong information, like, oh no, this is actually not for this medicine, this is for this one.
I've seen serious error. I mean, it's very easy to make an error in the ER for somebody to grab a drug fast and hang it, and then maybe dial in the wrong number, and they're getting a different rate. You know, it could slow the patient's heart rate down, it could speed it up, it could drop their blood pressure.
And I think now there's a lot of things in place to prevent errors. So you have the nurse who's administering, but then you have the pharmacist who verified the medication, then you have the provider who prescribed it. Then when you get to the patient, they want you to scan the patient's wristband to make sure you have the right patient. Prior to all of this, it was probably a whole lot easier to make mistakes when it comes to medication, at least, but now there's just so many systems in place that it shouldn't happen.
Oh yeah, lots of them. I worked with a male nurse who ultimately died of pulmonary disease. He always smoked. He was head nurse on the chest service for a period of time. I said, how ridiculous is this?
The funny thing is, when I started at St. Vincent's, you could smoke while you're working in the department. You could smoke in triage. My own boss was triaging and with a cigarette in her mouth with the patient, and the patients could smoke.
I don't think nurses are smoking cigarettes.
You could smoke, but you couldn't chew gum. That was the one rule in the ER, no gum chewing, but you could sit and smoke a cigarette when you're talking to the patient, which was amazing.
4 years. I had a Regents scholarship, which was very small at the time, but I think my tuition was $26 a semester.
Oh my goodness, in the 70s? Oh, that's great. That would be great. I think there would be a whole lot more nurses if that was how much it cost.
Columbia Presbyterian on 168th Street. I was an LPN first in 1978, and I wanted to be an RN. A friend of the family found this program, an accelerated program, but it was around $10,000 in 1981.
So I didn't necessarily do the tech to maybe LPN to RN. I think I was at a university already and just went straight to the RN, BSN. There really is not too many differences between the RN and the BSN. I think the BSN, when at the bachelor's level, is just more coursework, but not necessarily more nursing work. I think the nursing aspects are the same. There are some programs that allow you to go from BSN to doctorate. They have a lot more doctoral programs for nurses now. A lot of nurses are doing the med spas and going into aesthetics and dermatology. There's a lot of incentives now where you can go either for at like a discounted rate because you know there's a shortage.
So you're looking at pinning day, and the one on the right is me. Those were our caps, and we wore uniforms that were dresses. We had not evolved to pantsuits yet. We would get up and kneel on the bed to help the medic, and when your skirts were too short, everybody got quite a view. So rather than get longer skirts, wound up in pantsuits. Yes, that's it. I like pants. I'm not a skirt person. My mother used to say we all have Irish piano legs, you know, sort of thick at the ankles. They weren't Lycra like a lot of the pants are now. These were just, you know, cotton, almost like men's shirt material. They were white. You could bleach them to death.
Why would you wear white scrubs in an ER? We were in blood up to our knees by 9 o'clock in the morning, and the shift started at 8. And I used to get in trouble all the time for not wearing white underwear. It was a joke. I mean, because you could see right through these things. Some nurses wore regular nurses' uniform, but the color in the ER was white.
When I started off wearing scrubs, I think the color for us was seal blue. And then when I went over to Children's, I got the chance to wear maybe scrub bottoms and maybe like a cartoon top, which was fun.
These were made at St. Vincent's in the laundry room from sheets, and has a St. Vincent stamp on it, the beautiful embroidery. Then probably around 1990, we went to navy blue. And then all critical care went to navy blue. But we could purchase our own scrubs. They were no longer supplying them.
You have to provide your own scrubs. So you might get a pair of free scrubs here and there, but for the most part, you buy your own scrubs.
You had, you know, people getting, you know, enemas. It was very staining, where you just didn't get rid of it for the rest of the night. It was pretty messy.
If you got blood on you, you could still go down to laundry, and they would give you scrubs, but they would be usually greens from the OR.
This was like peak of COVID. I had a scrub cap. I had this mask that we were wearing. I was a part of this wave of supplying your own mask. And then I also had this, it was like a whole head cap. It was like a scrub hood. So it went over my head. I put the scrub cap over it. This is what I was wearing for months. So at first, it was the worst thing because, you know, all the patients that we were seeing had COVID. Everyone had COVID. So you had to gown up before you went into a room and then take everything off. But then we got used to it, I guess. It just became so normal for us so that to see people without it, it almost felt like you were naked. It was like, this is what I look like all the time for like at least a couple years.
I'm not sure what that is.
This, no idea how we're using this or what we're using this for.
I'm not an OR nurse, so I really don't know.
No, this just looks like it would hurt.
This might be a retractor.
These are retractors that hold the cavities open so the surgeon can visualize things. This is interesting because it has a nice way that you can pull that these other ones don't have. And my hand fits in there perfect. These are all hemostats, or commonly known as clamps.
Clamps for holding tissue, either to sew or to move it out of the way.
Because they lock. The sound? You hear it close. Cuts off a blood vessel. They also use it in suturing to hold the needle. This is a large curved hemostat. It's the same thing.
We used to call it a Big Mother Kelly. It's a Kelly clamp that we used in the emergency room a lot to put a chest tube in.
These 3 items right here, we still have. So this is just like regular scissors.
Oh, the scalpel holder. You would get the blade and snap it in here.
The size of the scalpel blades matter. For instance, you're going to put a big blade on here.
I think those are sponge forceps.
Depends on the angle they want to go in, but it's like that because it holds a sponge at the end.
There was no emergency medicine curriculum for the physicians. The first emergency room that was fully staffed by a physician pool, I think, was in like 1960. And it was a group of physicians who just said, let's go to the hospital and run this emergency room. And in New York, it was around the time of the mid-70s that a group pulled together and they developed the 911 committee. And their responsibility was to determine which emergency rooms were equipped to take ambulances. The ambulances were not trained. They were really transport vehicles, and with a driver and an attendant. Yeah, this is after the 70s.
Oh, it's after the 70s?
Oh,
How
yeah.
can you tell?
So the fact that these guys have uniforms, they have a real ambulance with an identifier, Mercy, a lot of equipment on this patient that could never have been applied, would not have been applied in the early 70s. When I first started, you got a patient on a stretcher and you figured it out.
St. Vincent's was a 911 hospital. That means we received 911 calls. Pretty much on the west side, if there was a trauma, we'd get it. Big cardiac, we'd get it. We also, in my early days, covered Jersey City, any traumas, because they didn't have a trauma center. They came through the tunnel, Brooklyn, and our area of Manhattan. You saw what the buses looked like, this is what we called them, buses. They didn't look like real ambulances. We had our own paramedics. We had our own ambulances. Every hospital doesn't have that anymore.
Now, I think a lot more facilities who have the capabilities for it, they have their own ambulance service, but that is mostly from facility to facility.
Back in the early 70s, the drugs of choice were heroin and pills, for the most part. We didn't have all these chemical geniuses creating all these newfangled, things.
Ecstasy. A big thing was Placidil. It's a psychiatric drug, but it also had side effects of getting you high.
In DC, there was this thing called K2. That was like synthetic marijuana. A lot of people came in with issues with that.
The thing I started doing a lot as a newbie was we used to pump everybody's stomach, which they don't really do that anymore.
Does this look familiar to you at all, this thing here?
No. This would be the patient, the exit, and then they would use this as like a siphon. Or, oh wait, here's the whole thing.
Do I know what this is? I don't think, no. Where are we placing this? What, I don't even, this is some type of feeding maybe device. This is my guess, but then I'm not sure what this is.
You would lather this up with a gel and put it through their nose this would be down in their stomach, and you would now have this amount. You would use this and put saline in copious amounts, and you would get pill fragments and other gastric juices and stuff, but you would essentially empty their stomach of anything that hadn't been already absorbed. And then you would put activated charcoal and let it sit in the stomach, take the tube out, and the activated charcoal would absorb whatever was left in their bellies. And then it came out the other end, and that was pretty ugly.
We just use this, I guess. This whole other part of the device is gone, and you just place the NG tube, will go down throat there, and then we will attach it to suction on the wall, and then that's how we do a stomach pump.
This was pretty medical standard early on until the development of toxicology as a specialty.
This looks like a female, some kind of female apparatus there. Well, yeah, for the old days. My mother had something like that. That's what it looked like to me.
Oh yeah, sure. You had people in the neighborhood who knew they could come over.
Good regulars or pain in the butt regulars? I have both.
Oh yeah, every ER has their regulars.
Sam used to come over. He had congestive heart failure, and he was alone, and he'd come in once a week. And you'd say, Sam, what are you doing? He'd say, well, I was lonesome. I had a hamburger. And put a whole bunch of salt on it and go into congestive heart failure and be admitted so he could hang out for a while.
We had a lot of homeless patients during that time. We provided hot meals, we provided clothing. They'd come in the ER at lunchtime, saying they had chest pain or whatever. They knew how to get in. You know, it doesn't matter. You have to honor whatever the person says. And they would be around for a while. We'd let them take a shower, and they really just wanted to stay there for the day, so they did.
You get your people that you're like, hey, you might as well clock in.
Not routinely. We were not very good about gloves and things. You know, if somebody came in, they were bleeding, you just delved in and did what you had to do. I got hepatitis from an open chest that we did. So.
No. In fact, you got yelled at if you wore gloves a lot for things because they felt it was offensive to the patient.
Gloves are a must most of the time, yeah, all the time. I think we probably are getting away from latex now because there's like a lot of patients who have allergies.
When we had the AIDS epidemic, we had so many patients. We had to figure out how we were going to identify those patients without violating their personal privacy.
Once I had my first AIDS patient, then we were completely gowned, gloved, head to toe.
And so we just started wearing gloves for everyone. Oh my God.
What's the deal with, you know, like the sexy nurse?
I don't know. I mean, it's, I don't know.
Well, neither of these women are me, I can tell you that.
That's funny.
You know, there was always sort of a porno fascination with nurses because they had contact with bodies, and you know, that if you had that kind of contact and you had that kind of availability, that you must be, you know, a hot number.
This is men. This is men. This is men. That's it's men. This is by men. So when I was in nursing school, you weren't allowed to wear nail polish, no jewelry, no earrings, and I had quite a head of hair then. I had to cut it. You had to wear it a certain way. You had to wear your cap. No perfume. That was 1978. So this was never existent.
It's like stewardesses, you know, it's like this perception that they're going to be playgirls and running around and fooling and easy and so on and so forth.
I think nursing, the profession as a whole, was just dominated by women and has always just been women. I'm just assuming that, you know, because it's always been women, someone turned it into like, take care of me.
Nurses will never be portrayed right, and women are never portrayed right. People that don't know would do something like this. And I've had my own doctors as patients, and I've had to put catheters in them, males, that I worked with. Can you imagine?
Truthfully, you say, seen one, see them all, keep moving. Well, we didn't have overhead lights. We had gooseneck lamps. We used a blood pressure cuff, which they don't anymore. They have electronic blood pressure, which I argue are less accurate than my ears. This is probably the cardiac monitor, as tiny as it is. In those days, you didn't have one for each room. They two were on wheels. And they didn't have them over the beds. We had cardiac monitor and maybe pulse oximetry. That was about it.
These are similar to the monitors we had over every stretcher. We started with a basic monitor that would just give you a heart rate that was smaller, but as time went by, we went into these big monitors, and this is like a critical care monitor that really gives you almost every system. This patient also likely has on an oxygen sensor on their finger, and that's an O2 saturation, and that's a wave I can see up here on this monitor. Looks normal.
I see a pressure bag over here. You got your monitors up there. We have a bladder scanner over here. We have the ultrasound machine. This is a gyroscope here. That's for your intubation right there. Your gyroscope just makes visualizing, like when you're doing your intubation, it just makes it easier to place a tube. You have your IV pump, your Alaris pump over there.
So the IV would hang, and we didn't have pumps. But when I first started, we always wore watches, and you played with the little thingy, and you checked, and you counted, and you made sure that if you needed 15 drops a minute, in a minute you had 15 drops.
I remember the pumps first coming then. That was in the early 80s before I got to St. Vincent's. And there were days when we didn't have enough pumps in the ER. We had to send our assistants early in the morning and go to other floors and take them.
I don't think I ever aspired to it, to be honest. I'm the oldest of 8 children, and in those days, women didn't have a lot of advantages unless you had a hook someplace. And so you were either a nun, not my cue, a mom, which was not my aspiration because I already had 6 kids behind me that I watched all the time, a teacher, or a nurse was really it. And nursing just seemed a little more exotic because I knew nobody who was a nurse.
I was very rowdy in high school, but I wanted to be a hairdresser. I went with my mother to the hairdressing school, got the little kit with the equipment and all that. In the interim, I got a summer job through a program. It was for high school graduates to get like a summer job in different places, and one of the jobs that I got to get was like an orderly that we transported the patients back and forth from the x-ray department. As I was doing that job, right by the entrance of the x-ray department was the emergency room. And there was the 2 double doors that said, emergency personnel only, no entrance beyond this point. I just looked at that door and I said, I want to be able to go through those doors. That's the job I want. There must be something exciting and important going on in there. And that was it.
I wanted to be a dentist. My mother is a nurse. She introduced me to the nursing profession, and she talked me into it. I was fresh out of high school and didn't have, I think, the capacity yet to do all those science courses for like pre-dent or pre-med. Nursing still has sciences, but it was just a different route. And my mom, she was the one that convinced me to do it. I took a chance, and once I got to understand what nursing was, and I saw the variety of different settings that I could work in as a nurse, I was sold.
Did you love being an ER nurse?
I loved being a nurse.
Why?
Why? I think because it gave me a sense of purpose. I could do something to make somebody feel better. It wasn't always successful, in which case then you had to deal with the family and try and make them feel okay about the end result.
It's not a thankless profession. You appreciate it and the patient does. And the people you work with appreciate you because people don't really know what we do.
In the beginning of COVID, I did a couple ER contracts, and then I transitioned over to the ICU. I don't know if I would have been able to do nursing as long as I've done it now if I was in the ER the whole time. I would have probably been so burnt out, either left the nursing profession as a whole or like changed specialties completely.
I was getting a little burnt out, not with the job, not with the patients, because I love the patients, but there was a lot of workplace violence that was increasing. I got spit at a couple times. There was one nurse, her nose was broken by a patient. So there was getting to be a lot of violence in the department, and we didn't feel we were like always getting the protection. I felt I was going to work my whole life, and I wanted to love what I do, and I feel that I couldn't be a nurse forever. And I got interested in law, and that's what I did.
Anytime I got really burnt or started to think, gee, maybe I don't like this anymore, there was always an opportunity to do something else without going anyplace else. And it was fun. It was good. So there was always something to keep me changed, occupied, fighting, arguing, opportunities that I don't think would have been otherwise available to me.